I never imagined my life would change the way it did that night. It wasn't some dramatic affair, no late-night rendezvous or lipstick-stained collars. It started with something small, almost imperceptible, a missing $20. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe I bought too many coffees, or maybe I didn't remember using the money on parking. But then the same thing happened again and again. The math didn't add up. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. Jude, my 17-year-old nephew, had been over every weekend, spending hours with me, playing games, building PCs, and laughing about school. He was quiet, withdrawn, but polite. The kid I thought I knew. But something had changed. 3 weeks ago, I found $120 missing from my wallet, again, just like before. This time, though, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront him. What I didn't expect was his reaction. He cried. He said he never took anything from me, that I didn't trust him. He said all the right things, made me question myself, but I knew. I knew what I saw. The worst part? His parents, my brother Sullivan and his wife Charlotte, sided with him. They didn't even give me a chance to explain. Charlotte called me a liar, accusing me of being jealous of their family. How could they not believe me? This was my nephew, a kid I spent years helping to grow up, teaching him everything I knew. And now they were turning it all around on me. I had no choice but to take matters into my own hands. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I used prop money to catch him, the kind of money they used in movies. It looked just like real bills, but it was fake. The moment I saw Jude slip one of the prop 20s into his pocket, I knew I had him. But the real shock was still to come. The day I thought I had caught him red-handed, he ended up getting arrested for passing counterfeit bills at the mall. I never expected this. I never imagined I would be the one who caused my nephew's life to spiral like this. I didn't know where it would all end. I didn't know if my family would ever be the same again. And now I'm left wondering, did I make the right choice? I'm Lauren Hayes, 36, a woman who built a life for herself one step at a time. I've always been independent, strong-willed, and fiercely loyal to the people I loved. I'm not the type to play games, especially when it comes to family. I've worked hard for everything I have, and my home, a 3-bedroom house I bought 5 years ago, is my sanctuary. Growing up, I was always close to my older brother, Sullivan. He's 39 now, and even though there's a decent age gap between us, it never felt like it. We had our share of childhood arguments, but we always found a way back to each other. When our parents died in a car accident 8 years ago, it was Sullivan who helped me pick up the pieces. I was in pieces myself, barely holding on, and he was there, steady, when I needed him most. I'll never forget how he supported me through that. His kindness became a lifeline I held on to when everything else felt like it was crumbling. He never hesitated to help me, and in return, I did the same for him. I helped him and Charlotte, his wife, with a down payment on their first house. It was a no-brainer. I would do anything for him. In the years that followed, we kept up a tradition of Sunday dinners together, family time that we both cherished. Then, Jude came into the picture. He was born when I was just 19, a sophomore in college. I remember feeling overwhelmed when I first heard that Sullivan was going to be a dad, but I was excited too. I thought it would be the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. Jude grew up around me. I watched him grow from a quiet, adorable kid into a teenager who, in some ways, was still that shy little boy I remembered. But over time, things started to shift. Charlotte and Sullivan, while loving, started adopting what they called a respectful parenting philosophy. At first, it sounded good, giving Jude the freedom to make his own choices, allowing him to learn from his mistakes. But as time went on, it became apparent that their version of respect meant never saying no to him. They believed in letting him learn from natural consequences, which, in practice, meant Jude never faced any real repercussions for his actions. When Jude was 12, he broke a neighbor's window while playing baseball in the street. Sullivan and Charlotte paid for the damages, but never made Jude do chores or lose privileges to earn the money back. At 14, Jude got caught vaping at school. He had a long conversation with his parents about health, but there were no consequences. No restrictions on his phone, no loss of privileges. Last year, he failed 2 classes because he stopped turning in his homework. They hired him a tutor, but never made him prove he was using his time wisely. It felt like they were trying to protect him from the world, but they didn't realize they were doing him a disservice. Still, Jude and I had a decent relationship. We bonded over gaming, over PC builds, and over late-night talks. I taught him how to build and overclock gaming computers, something I had learned over the years. Every other Saturday, I would pick him up from his house, and we'd spend the afternoon together. Sometimes we went to the arcade. Other times, we just stayed in and played games. Jude, quiet and reserved, seemed happy enough. I thought I was doing right by him, providing him with a space where he could just be himself, free from the pressure of his parents' expectations. But there were little things, little signs I missed. Looking back, I should have seen it. I should have noticed how he became more distant, how he started to withdraw more into his phone and gaming, how he barely interacted with me unless I initiated everything. It wasn't just the typical teenage rebellion, it was something deeper. And then, 3 months ago, it all started to fall apart. It started so quietly. At first, I couldn't even pinpoint when things began to change. But looking back, I can trace it to one moment that should have made me pause. It was late October when I first noticed the missing money. I had a simple system. Every Monday, I withdrew $40 from the ATM in my building lobby. That was the amount I typically spent on parking and quick bites throughout the week. It worked. I knew exactly how much I had at any given time, and I kept track of every penny. But that Thursday, I went to buy my sandwich, and I was surprised to find I only had $12 left. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I had been buying more coffee than I realized, or maybe I'd forgotten to record one of my purchases. So, I made a mental note to pay more attention. The next week, the same thing happened. I pulled out $40 on Monday, and by Friday, I had just $8. That was when I started keeping receipts for everything, just to be sure. The following week, I kept track of every dollar. When I counted my receipts, they added up to $18 in spending, but my wallet had only $5 left. That's when I really started to wonder. I knew I was careful with my cash, and it was adding up in ways that didn't make sense. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I couldn't. This was Jude, my nephew, the kid who had grown up in front of me, the kid I had taught how to build gaming rigs, who I took to the arcade and bought burgers for without thinking twice, the kid who sent me memes in the middle of the week just to make me laugh. He was polite, always helping with groceries, always thanking me when I bought him a new game or took him out for food. He was family, and family didn't steal, did they? But the signs were clear. The numbers didn't lie. I needed to confront him, and fast. So I made a decision. I'd do what I had to do to figure it out, even if it meant confronting him directly. I remember texting Jude that week, telling him I had a new co-op game we could try. He texted back, almost immediately, saying he'd love to. I wasn't sure if he could sense something in my tone, but I was trying to keep it light, to act like nothing was wrong. I wanted him to feel like nothing had changed, even though I was silently preparing for what I feared would be an uncomfortable conversation. Saturday came. I picked him up like usual, and we drove to my house. The plan was simple. I'd spend time with him, let things play out, and when the moment felt right, I'd confront him. But instead of heading to the arcade, I took him to an empty parking lot behind the old community center on Maple Street. We sat there in silence for a moment, the engine humming softly. Then I turned to face him. "Jude," I started, my voice steady, despite the flutter in my chest. "I know something's been going on. Money has been disappearing from my wallet. Money I know I didn't spend. And I need to understand why." His expression shifted immediately. His eyes widened, and his lips quivered slightly, as if caught between denial and confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, almost too quickly. He looked away, but his hands were shaking. The walls between us were coming down, and for a second I thought he might admit it, that this would be over. But then the words I never expected came tumbling out. "I can't believe you would accuse me of that. After everything we've done together, you really think I'd steal from you?" He started to cry. Tears filled his eyes, his voice cracking as he pleaded for me to trust him. He said he couldn't believe I was doubting him. He said I had to be mistaken. He said I must have been going through something in my own life and took it out on him. It wasn't the reaction I had expected. I thought he'd either confess or deny it, but his emotional outburst was enough to make me question everything. Was I wrong? Was this some misunderstanding on my part? But I knew deep down what I had seen. This wasn't a mistake. The money was gone, and the evidence was piling up. Still, I didn't want to escalate it further. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I didn't push him that day. Instead, I drove him back home in silence. He got out of the car without a word, not even a goodbye, and walked straight into his house. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Charlotte. Before I could say anything, she started yelling. She said Jude had come home crying, telling them I accused him of stealing. She said I was clearly going through something and taking it out on her son. She told me to stop lying and causing trouble, that maybe I was just jealous of their family. I didn't get a word in. She screamed over me, her voice high with anger. She said, "If you ever make up lies about Jude again, you won't be welcome around him anymore." Then Sullivan got on the phone. He was calm, but I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. He asked me to just apologize to Jude and let it go. He said it wasn't worth dragging things out, but I couldn't apologize, not when I knew the truth. How could they not see it? They didn't believe me, and they didn't want to. That's when I knew I had to prove it. I needed evidence they couldn't ignore. It was a Saturday morning when I finally decided to take matters into my own hands. The week after the confrontation, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Jude, the tears in his eyes, the pleading in his voice. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me still saw that sweet, quiet kid I'd spent so many Saturdays with. But there was another part of me, a part I couldn't ignore anymore, that knew something wasn't right. I knew what I saw. I couldn't trust him anymore. So I devised a plan. A simple one, really. I was going to set a trap. I spent 2 days researching. I found websites selling prop money, money used in movies and music videos. The bills looked almost identical to real currency, with just subtle differences. It was a gamble. But I needed proof, something concrete that even my brother and Charlotte couldn't deny. When the fake bills arrived in the mail, I held them up to a real $20 bill. The differences were subtle, almost imperceptible unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. But they were perfect for what I needed, something that would pass the eye test, but be easy to detect with a counterfeit pen or UV light. I felt a tight knot in my stomach as I slid the prop money into my wallet. I was about to put everything on the line. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust, betrayal, and my family. The plan was simple. I'd invite Jude over, just like I did every other Saturday. I'd leave my wallet in plain sight, like I always did when I was getting ready for him to arrive. I'd set him up, just enough to catch him in the act. Saturday came, and I waited. When Jude arrived around noon, he was just like he always was, polite, eager to hang out, his usual self. He greeted me with a hug, and we started playing the new co-op game I had downloaded. For the next hour, everything felt normal again. We laughed, joked around, and played like we had so many times before. I tried to act as natural as possible, but inside I was a mess. I kept my eyes on him while also trying to act distracted, making sure my wallet was in plain view on the kitchen counter. It was the moment of truth. I made my excuse to leave the room and walk downstairs to the basement, the door creaking loudly as I opened it. I stayed down there for about 6 or 7 minutes, enough time to give him the opportunity to take whatever he wanted from my wallet without being caught. I wasn't worried about him knowing I was gone. I had done this kind of thing before, back when he was younger, trying to teach him responsibility. But now, this felt different. I wasn't playing a game anymore. I wasn't helping him. I was testing him. When I came back upstairs, Jude was still sitting on the couch, controller in hand, totally absorbed in the game. He didn't even glance up when I returned to the living room, so I took my seat next to him. We played for another 2 hours, chatting between rounds, ordering pizza like we always did. Finally, around 5 p.m., I drove him home as usual. He was still the same old Jude, smiling and joking about the game we'd played. But as soon as he left, I rushed back inside, heart racing. I didn't hesitate. I opened my wallet and checked. One of the prop 20s was gone. My stomach dropped. I stood there in complete silence, staring at the wallet, my mind reeling. It was over. I had finally caught him. But in a way, I had also caught myself. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding on to the hope that I was wrong. I wanted so badly to believe the best in him. But now I couldn't deny the truth. Jude had been stealing from me. I didn't call Sullivan. I didn't call Charlotte. I didn't tell Jude. I just sat there, stunned by the magnitude of what had just happened. For a brief moment, everything in my life felt shattered. Family, trust, love. How could things have gone so wrong? The next morning, my phone rang. It was Sullivan. His voice was frantic, and he didn't let me speak. "Jude got arrested," he said. "They caught him at the mall. He was using a fake $20 bill to buy a game. The cashier used a counterfeit pen, and it flagged as fake. The cops came, and they took him in." My heart sank. Jude was in handcuffs. I didn't know what to say. My nephew, the boy I had helped raise, the boy who had been like my own family, was in a holding cell because of what he had done. Because of me. I had set the stage for it. Sullivan's voice cracked as he demanded to know if I had anything to do with it. "How could you let this happen?" he yelled, the pain in his voice palpable. "How could you do this to him?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. The guilt, the anger, and the heartbreak were overwhelming. All I could do was let him yell, let him vent, as I processed the weight of what had just happened. When the call ended, I felt numb. There were no more words left to say. I sat there in complete silence, the house eerily still, and thought about everything that had led me to this point. I had caught him, but I had lost everything in the process. The moment Sullivan hung up on me, I was left in a haze. The phone felt heavy in my hand, and my body felt like it was moving in slow motion. I had done this. I had pushed too far, done something I never thought I would do. The weight of the entire situation crashed down on me like a wave, and for a second I felt completely lost. I didn't just expose Jude's lies, I exposed the cracks in our family. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the exact moment when I had taken that prop money, set it up, and watched Jude take it. It wasn't a mistake. I had seen him do it. But the aftermath, the reality of the situation, hit harder than I ever imagined. My heart hurt for him, for the boy I had tried so hard to protect, and now I had to face the consequences of my actions. In the silence of my living room, the thought that kept creeping into my mind was, did I go too far? Could I have handled this in another way? I had every right to confront him, to protect myself, but I never thought it would end in an arrest. I didn't know where to turn next. My brother Sullivan had just accused me of destroying his son's life. Charlotte had screamed at me like I was the enemy, and now Jude was sitting in a holding cell, terrified, probably ashamed, facing charges he didn't deserve. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? The next day, I sat in front of my kitchen table, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I didn't know if I should feel guilty or justified. The guilt was overwhelming, because this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about family, about love. Jude was my nephew. I loved him like he was my own. But he had betrayed me, and I had betrayed him in turn. But then came the moment where I started to question everything. Had I really been justified in what I did? I remembered the first time I had felt this way, that first week when the money started disappearing. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I wanted to believe Jude. I wanted to believe the best in him. But now the truth was undeniable. He had stolen from me. He had lied to me, and worse, he had convinced me I was wrong. It was during those quiet moments, those seconds of reflection, that I realized how much of this situation wasn't just about the money. It was about what had happened in the years leading up to this. Sullivan and Charlotte's parenting style had allowed Jude to get away with everything. They didn't teach him responsibility. They coddled him, ignored the consequences, and now he was facing the repercussions of his actions. But I couldn't avoid the truth. I had helped bring him to this point. I had been part of the problem too. I decided I needed to talk to Jude. I couldn't let him sit there, lost in shame, without at least knowing that I was still here for him, even after everything. So I texted him, and to my surprise, he replied almost immediately. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared. I didn't know how to stop. I'm sorry." The message wasn't the angry deflection I had expected. It wasn't another denial. It was a genuine apology, a rare moment of vulnerability I had been waiting for. I arranged to meet him at a local park, a neutral space. When I saw him, standing there under the shade of a tree, his shoulders slumped, his face drawn, I could hardly recognize him. He wasn't the bright-eyed teenager who used to make me laugh over a game. He looked like a different person, beaten down, broken. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, his head down. Finally, I said, "Jude, what happened?" He glanced up at me, eyes red-rimmed, and his voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't want you to hate me." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. How could I respond? Part of me wanted to shout at him for betraying me, but another part of me, the part that loved him, the part that still believed in him, knew that the damage was done, and there was nothing I could do to undo it. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but you need to understand what you've done. You need to face the consequences, and that's not just about the money. It's about the trust you've broken." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know, I messed up. I was scared." I didn't know what else to say. I wanted to comfort him, but I also knew that everything had changed. Our relationship wasn't the same anymore. The trust had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fix it. Later that night, I sat in front of my computer, the screen blank. I didn't know what to do next. I wanted to reach out to Sullivan, but every time I thought about it, the words felt too heavy, too loaded. The conversation would be impossible. He had already turned on me. He'd already made up his mind that I was the villain in this story. What happened to us? I whispered to myself. What happened to family? The phone vibrated in my hand. It was a text from Sullivan. I don't know how to fix this, but we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keys. What did I even say to him? Would he ever see me as anything but the one who destroyed his son's life? Would I ever be able to see him as the brother I used to trust? The days that followed felt like a blur. Every minute seemed to stretch into an hour, and every hour dragged on in a haze of guilt, regret, and confusion. Sullivan called me twice more after his text. I didn't pick up. He left messages, but they were all the same. We need to talk, Lauren. We can't keep avoiding this. I didn't know what to say. The silence between us, the hurt that had festered in both of us, was so thick now that it felt impossible to bridge the gap. Sullivan wasn't just angry with me. He was disappointed. His voice, when he left those voicemails, wasn't accusatory like Charlotte's. It was tired, worn out, like he had no energy left to fight me or defend Jude. But he still wanted me to admit I was wrong, to apologize, to make it all go away. But how could I apologize for what I had seen? How could I take back the evidence I had found when I knew the truth? I didn't want to destroy his family, but I also couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I had caught Jude in the act. It wasn't my fault. Yet, deep down, I felt responsible. I had caused this. I was the one who had escalated it all. I didn't even want to admit it to myself, but I knew it was true. Setting up the trap was something I had never even imagined I would do. I had crossed a line, and the consequences were now all too real. Then came the phone call that pushed everything over the edge. It was Charlotte. She didn't even wait for me to say hello. The moment I picked up, she started screaming. "You've ruined everything, Lauren!" Her words were sharp, piercing, like knives digging into my chest. She accused me of turning her family upside down, of lying and manipulating everyone around me. She didn't care about Jude's mistakes. All she cared about was that I had exposed them. "He's your nephew, Lauren. How could you do this to him? To us?" Her voice was shaking with rage, but I could hear the cracks in it, cracks that told me she was barely holding it together. She was furious, yes, but I could tell she was afraid too. Afraid of what the truth would do to their family. Afraid of losing her son in a way she couldn't fix. "You've destroyed Jude's future," she continued, "and now we don't know how to put the pieces back together." It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the arrest. It was about something bigger, something deeper. Charlotte had never been one to admit she was wrong, and now she wasn't even acknowledging her son's actions. She wasn't looking at the bigger picture. She was looking at me as the scapegoat, the one who had torn everything apart. I listened to her rant for a few more minutes, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I was numb. I had never imagined that it would get to this point. My own brother's family was turning on me, accusing me of ruining everything, and I had no one left to turn to. When she finally stopped talking, I said quietly, "I don't regret what I did, Charlotte. I had to know the truth. I couldn't let him get away with this." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again, her voice low, cold. "Well, I hope it was worth it, Lauren, because you've lost us." Before I could say anything else, she hung up. That night, I stared at my phone, the screen still glowing from the conversation. "You've lost us." The words echoed in my head over and over again. Had I really lost them? Or was this just a temporary fallout, one that time would heal? Sullivan didn't call back after Charlotte's outburst. The messages and texts stopped. The silence was suffocating. I hadn't seen Jude since the day I confronted him. He didn't text. He didn't call. I had no idea what he was going through, and that killed me. I wanted to reach out to him, but I wasn't sure if I could. Would he resent me for what I did? Would he ever look at me the same way again? It was hard enough to know I had betrayed his trust. But what about the damage to my relationship with my brother? The days felt longer, and with each passing day, the isolation deepened. I couldn't stop thinking about how everything had spiraled out of control, how I'd let my emotions, my desperation, take me to a place where I couldn't take back the choices I had made. Then came the letter from Sullivan. It was in my mailbox on Thursday afternoon, tucked inside a plain white envelope. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the handwriting on the front. I didn't even want to open it, but I did. "Lauren," the letter began in Sullivan's familiar scrawl, I don't know where to start. Everything is a mess right now, and I don't know how to fix it. Charlotte is angry, and Jude is, well, you know how he is. But I can't stop thinking about what happened, about how I didn't believe you. I should have. I should have trusted you. His words were laced with regret, with something more that I couldn't quite name. I can't change what happened. I can't fix it, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I know I haven't said it. I know I haven't done enough. But I will try. I just don't know if it's enough anymore. The letter ended with a simple, heartfelt, I miss you, Lauren. I just want my family back. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about the betrayal or the lies. It was about a family that had been torn apart by misunderstandings, by pride, by fear. But there was hope in Sullivan's words, a small flicker of hope. This escalation deepens the emotional intensity of the story, showing the toll that Lauren's actions have taken on her family. As the confrontation reaches its peak, Lauren is left to confront the unraveling of her relationships, particularly with Sullivan and Charlotte. The emotional stakes continue to rise as she processes the consequences of her decisions, but there's a glimmer of potential reconciliation. A few days after receiving Sullivan's letter, I found myself standing in my kitchen at midnight, staring at the empty cup of tea in front of me, the steam rising slowly into the quiet night air. The house felt more empty than it ever had. It wasn't just the silence. It was the weight of everything that had happened. The loneliness that had settled inside me like a dark cloud I couldn't escape from. I couldn't remember the last time I had spoken to anyone beyond casual small talk. The messages from Sullivan had stopped, the phone calls from Charlotte hadn't come, and I hadn't heard from Jude in weeks. It was as if I had vanished from their lives. I had told myself that I needed to stay strong, to hold on to the person I had been before everything had gone wrong. But the truth was, I was breaking inside. The weight of everything I had done, the hurt I had caused, and the family I had torn apart, it was too much to carry. The house was too quiet. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I kept thinking about the way Charlotte had screamed at me on the phone, the way Sullivan had sounded when he finally admitted he was torn between his family and me. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my mind, hearing the same words, feeling the same sting in my chest. You've lost us. I couldn't stop thinking about Jude either. I had caught him in the act of stealing. I had exposed him, and now he was facing consequences that no teenager should have to face. Had I done the right thing? I had always thought I was doing the right thing by setting the trap. I had told myself that I was protecting myself, that I was getting to the bottom of the situation before it got worse. But now, it felt like I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I opened my phone, scrolling through the messages and texts that sat there. Messages from Sullivan, from Charlotte, and from Jude that had never been sent. The unread ones, the ones that never made it through. I had wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to say to any of them. I had caused this. It wasn't their fault. It was mine. The guilt gnawed at me. Why hadn't I just trusted them? Why hadn't I just believed in my family instead of pushing them away, instead of doubting Jude? I thought back to the old days when Sullivan and I were close, when we shared everything without hesitation. Back when Jude was just a kid and everything seemed so simple, before everything fell apart. I missed that. I missed being part of a family that could laugh together, fight together, and make up without holding grudges. I felt a sudden wave of shame crash over me, stronger than it had ever been before. I picked up the letter Sullivan had written and read it again. I miss you, Lauren. I just want my family back. That sentence hit me like a punch to the stomach. The pain of everything I had lost, everything that was slipping through my fingers, felt unbearable. Had I really destroyed everything? I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking as the tears finally came. I hadn't cried like this in months. I had held it all together, trying to appear strong for everyone, even when it felt like my world was falling apart. But now the floodgates opened, and I couldn't stop the overwhelming sadness. I had lost my nephew, I had lost my brother, and worst of all, I had lost myself in the process. The next morning, everything felt like a blur. I could barely remember what I had done the day before. The weight of the guilt pressed down on me, and it felt like I was suffocating under it. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I had to face the reality of the situation. I had to take responsibility for the choices I made. I didn't want to accept that everything had changed, but I couldn't pretend anymore. The family I had known was gone. The trust I had taken for granted was shattered, and there was no way to fix it, no easy way back to what we once had. A few days later, I received another text from Sullivan. This time, he didn't ask to meet. He didn't ask for any more explanations. It was a simple message, almost resigned in its tone. I've been thinking a lot about you, about us, and I realize I've made a lot of mistakes too. Maybe we both have, but I need you to know I'm still here. When you're ready, let me know. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment where I had to decide whether to try and rebuild what we had or to let it go entirely. Could we rebuild? Could I even forgive myself enough to let that happen? I sat there staring at the message from Sullivan, my fingers hovering over my phone screen. For the first time in days, I felt something stir inside me, something more than guilt and regret. Maybe there was a way back. I had been sitting in my house, drowning in the weight of my decisions, pretending that I was the only one who had been hurt by this whole situation. But the truth was, we were all hurt. Jude, Sullivan, Charlotte, and me. We had all played a part in the unraveling of what was once a family. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way to heal, if I was willing to face the truth and take the first step. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I couldn't fix everything. I couldn't undo the damage. But I could try. I could reach out, and I could start making things right with Sullivan. If there was any hope left of salvaging what we had, it started with me. I decided to call him, not because I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but because I knew it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to hide anymore. I didn't want to keep pretending like everything was fine. I had made a mistake, and it was time to own up to it. The phone rang twice before he picked up. His voice was softer than it had been the last time we spoke, the tension still hanging in the air between us, but not as sharp as it had been. "Lauren," he said, his voice hesitant but hopeful. "I didn't expect to hear from you." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Sully. I'm sorry for everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, quieter now. "I've been thinking too, about what happened, about Jude, about everything." His words were carefully measured, but there was something in them, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. It wasn't just anger anymore. There was understanding, and maybe even a bit of regret. "I should have believed you from the beginning," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know how to handle it, and I failed you. I failed Jude." I felt a knot in my chest loosen, and for the first time in weeks, I dared to believe that maybe things could be repaired. Maybe we could rebuild the connection we once had. But it would take time. It would take effort. It would take forgiveness. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, "but I want to try. I want to make things right between us." Sullivan was quiet for a moment before he spoke again, his voice softer now. "I don't know if we can go back to the way things were, but I'm willing to try too. We have to start somewhere." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that things might eventually get better. It wasn't going to be easy, but we could move forward if we both tried. "What about Jude?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "How is he doing?" Sullivan sighed. "He's struggling. He still hasn't fully come to terms with what happened. He's ashamed, Lauren, but I think he's starting to see where he went wrong. He's been working hard in the diversion program, doing the community service, but I can tell he's still lost. He doesn't know where to go from here." I felt a pang in my heart. I haven't seen him since everything went down. I don't know what to say to him either. Sullivan's voice softened again. "He misses you, Lauren. He really does, but he doesn't know how to reach out either. He's afraid you'll hate him for what he did." That was the moment I realized how much Jude needed me, despite everything that had happened. He was lost and confused, unsure of where he stood in this fractured family. He wasn't just the one who had stolen from me. He was also the one who had been let down by his parents, by me. He had been neglected emotionally in ways I hadn't fully realized. The conversation with Sullivan didn't solve everything. It didn't magically fix the mess we had created. But it did something important. It cracked open the door to healing. We could start again. And if we both worked at it, we might find a way to rebuild our relationship, piece by piece. I knew it wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't carrying the burden alone anymore. Sullivan and I were in this together. I texted him shortly after our call. "Let's meet. We'll figure this out, together." The following days were awkward and uncertain. I didn't know how to face Jude yet. The guilt was still heavy in my chest every time I thought about him, about how I had set him up, about how I had taken the choice away from him and forced him to face his mistakes before he was ready. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this define our relationship forever. If I truly wanted to fix things, I had to take that first step toward forgiveness, toward healing, toward understanding. The days after my conversation with Sullivan felt both hopeful and heavy. There was a palpable shift in the air, as if the tension had loosened just a little. But beneath the surface, everything was still raw. The damage had been done, and no amount of words could undo the hurt I had caused. I knew I had to see Jude. We had to talk, face to face, and I couldn't keep avoiding him. But the thought of seeing him again, after everything that had happened, made my stomach churn. What could I possibly say to him? "I'm sorry," didn't feel like enough. It was a phrase that seemed too small for the depth of the betrayal, for the trust that had been shattered between us. I had set him up, caught him in a lie, and now he was paying the price for it. But it wasn't just him who had paid. I had too. The text message from Sullivan had been a small olive branch, but it didn't change the fact that our family had fractured beyond recognition. Charlotte still hadn't spoken to me. She hadn't even acknowledged my existence, and I couldn't blame her for it. She was hurt, and I had no idea if that would ever change. I knew she blamed me for everything. She blamed me for setting the trap, for causing the situation to spiral out of control. And maybe she was right. But Jude, he was different. I still loved him. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't just walk away. I had to be there for him. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, the screen flashing as the phone rang in my ear. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought he wouldn't answer, or maybe I was afraid that he would. I needed him to hear me out, to know that I wasn't abandoning him. The phone clicked, and I heard his voice on the other end, quiet and hesitant. "Hello?" I took a deep breath. "Jude." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, but I didn't want to waste any time. I had already waited too long. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I should have trusted you. I should have believed in you, but I didn't. And I need you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you need." There was another long pause before he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Aunt Lauren." I felt a stab of pain in my chest at his words. Of course he didn't trust me. I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. I know. I swallowed hard, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But I want to try, Jude. I want to rebuild this. I know it's going to take time. I know it won't be easy, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "I don't know, Aunt Lauren. Everything's messed up. I don't know how to fix it." "We don't have to fix it all at once. We just have to start somewhere." Jude was quiet for a moment before he spoke again. "I don't even know where to begin. I've messed everything up. I can't fix it. I can't go back to how things were. I don't expect you to, but we can start by talking. We can start by being honest with each other." I could tell from the way his voice softened that he was considering it, even if he didn't know what to say. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll try. But I'm not sure I can forgive you for what happened." That was the hardest part, the truth of it. I couldn't expect him to forgive me. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I had to keep trying. A few days later, I met with Sullivan, just the two of us, at the diner we used to go to when we were kids. It felt like the weight of everything was still between us, but there was a shift in the air. It wasn't the same as it had been, but it was something. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee, neither of us sure what to say next. Finally, Sullivan spoke, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I've been thinking about everything. About Jude, about you, about us. And I realized I didn't handle this well. I should have believed you, Lauren. You were right. I was blind, and I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to admit Jude had messed up, but I should have trusted you from the start." I felt my chest tighten as his words sank in. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the first step, the first real acknowledgement that we were both responsible for the way things had fallen apart. "I should have told you sooner that I'm here. I know I've been hard to reach, but I'm willing to try too. For Jude. For us." He took a deep breath, then looked at me. "We need to fix this. We can't just let it stay like this." I nodded slowly. "I agree." It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but there was a flicker of hope now, a glimmer of something that wasn't as bleak as it had been. Maybe it wouldn't be enough to mend everything, but it was a start. As we left the diner, Sullivan told me that Jude was going to be okay, that he was doing better with the community service program, and that he was slowly working through his feelings. I didn't know if it was true, but I chose to believe it for the sake of starting fresh. But even as we talked about the future, I knew there would be no quick fix. It would take time. A lot of time. And the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive myself for what I'd done to my family. It's strange how life works sometimes, how everything can feel so broken, and then, bit by bit, it starts to come back together. Months have passed since the day I confronted Jude, since the day I finally broke through the silence that had been choking me. The walls between my family and me are still there, but they're not as high as they once were. The cracks are slowly being patched up, not with perfect solutions, but with small, deliberate acts of healing. I've learned something important through all of this. Healing doesn't come from perfection. It doesn't come from instant fixes or grand gestures. It comes from accepting that things will never be the same, and that's okay. What matters is how you choose to move forward, step by step, even when it feels like you've lost everything. I haven't spoken to Charlotte much. She's still angry, still hurting, and I don't know if we'll ever have the kind of relationship we once did. But there's something different now. I no longer feel the need to chase after her forgiveness. I've learned that it's okay to let people heal in their own time, and sometimes that means giving them space. Sullivan and I have started talking again, slowly. It's not perfect, but we're both trying. We talk about the weather, about random things, about life, and sometimes when the conversation shifts, I catch a glimpse of the brother I used to know, the one who helped me through the hardest parts of my life. We're not there yet, not by a long shot, but we're closer than we were. And Jude, he's still my nephew. We talk sometimes and it's awkward at first, but he's opening up. It's not easy for him to let go of the shame, and I don't expect him to forgive me right away, but he's trying. And that's enough for now. He's been working hard, getting through his community service and probation program. He's learning the lessons the hard way, but he's learning. As for me, I've had to find a new sense of balance. I've had to rebuild my own life, piece by piece. I started volunteering at a local shelter, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. I took up photography, something simple, something that reminded me to look for beauty in the world, even when things felt bleak. I started traveling again, planning small trips, learning to take care of myself without the weight of guilt dragging me down. The truth is, I don't have a neat conclusion to this story. Not everything has been fixed. I still don't know if Charlotte will ever speak to me again. I don't know if Sullivan and I will ever go back to the way we were. I don't know if Jude will ever see me as the person I want him to see. But what I've learned is that sometimes life isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about moving forward with the pieces you have left. So here I am, looking forward to the next chapter. It's not perfect, it's not clean, but it's mine, and maybe that's enough. The lesson I've learned through all of this is simple. Trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it takes time to rebuild, but you can start again. You can always start again. You just have to keep moving forward, even when the path is unclear. And if there's one thing I've come to believe, it's this. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that shape you into the person you're meant to be.